What's up? I'm Dan Random, and today I got to change my inner and outer tie rod ends on my Integra. So here are old ones from the first side I already did. This is the inner, very bad. And this is the outer, also very bad. And here are the new parts for the side that I have to remove. So I'm going to start by taking off the castle nut here. Now I noticed I'm missing the cotter pin on both sides, but you will have to start by removing the cotter pin. It's a 17 here. Mine's a 17, yours could differ. Then either take a fork or just your sledgehammer. I don't care if I damage this, so I'm just going to beat this off with the hammer. There you go. Next we have to release this jam nut. This is 7/8 and this is 19 millimeters or 3/4. Now my new stuff both is 7/8, so I mean, if yours is the same brand that mine is, which is Mevotech, you may need two 7/8 wrenches. To make this easy, position your wrenches like this and squeeze with two hands. Well, I tried that. I even tried holding it with both wrenches and hitting it with the sledgehammer, positioning a wrench on something safely. Nothing was really working, so I am just going to take my cutter disc and cut somewhere back in here, and then I'll get my tool here that I rented from AutoZone and get that on the back, well, after I remove the boot. Alright. So that came off pretty easily. It's now cut. I have to rip the rest of the boot off. Now this boot was tearing. I'm just going to rip off as many pieces and chunks as I can until I get back to that metal band. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick a smaller screwdriver under the little spot that sticks up and wiggle it loose to give more room to pop this guy in. And when I tap this in a bit, it usually just breaks that metal band. So let me get this ripped out real quick. And in case you're wondering how I'm ripping out these big chunks of the boot to get all the way back, well, it's with a giant pair of pliers. Just sticking them in there, getting a good bite on a section. If I can do this on camera. Well, that was a very small section. But you see, more like sections like this normally come out. It's easier to do off camera, so let me get this done real quick. Well, I got at least half of it out, and I think at this point, if I just take off the inner tie rod, it'll give me a little more room to get the rest of the boot off so that I can get the new boot on. Now I think using this tool on camera is pretty much out of the question here. But what you want to do is you stick this piece on right here till you feel it lock. Then you carefully slip this on, and once it's on, you then take your finger and slide this lock shut. And then you pull back on this, and then you take your big breaker bar, stick it in the end here, and give it a good turn. Then once you have the inner tie rod end spun off, you just need to unlock the tool here, pull all the little parts out, and you will need this tool to tighten up the new one. So, let's see how bad, oh geez, I think this one's actually worse than the other one. Wow. How about this? And this side is actually a little better, but the inner is definitely worse. And by the way, cutting this might actually make it a little easier to get this tool over so you don't have to slide it so far. So here are the new parts. This nut here comes with both pieces, but you want to remove it now to put this on the car, and you pretty much just need it out of the way to slip the new boot over that nut there. So let's get this installed, doing the same thing in reverse. I'm going to get it started finger tight. So normally there's a washer with two little ears that fit into there, but it looks like on my washer the little ears broke off and they don't give you a new one here. So I guess I'm just gonna have to install it without it. All right, I tightened it as hard as I could with my long breaker bar. I don't actually know the torque spec, but I know it's pretty hard. So I just crank it as hard as I can. This new boot comes with zip ties. It's pretty difficult to get the one on the back, so let's try to get that on next. Well, I forgot to remove the rest of the boot before putting that on, but now the rest of the boot is removed. Let's get this new boot on now. So now that the boot is installed, we have to put the jam nut on. Then next, once this is back far enough, we then take this. Don't forget to put our little grease fitting on. This is an 8mm. Let me do that real quick. Move the whole inner and outer tie rod up a little bit out of the way so that you can spin this on without hitting this. Now, as you can see here, I actually had to find another grease fitting that I only put in part of the way. It got really tight anyway, so I just left it, you know, a little bit out. But the one that came with it actually would not go in. It seems like the fitting itself had bad threads from the factory, because I was able to put a bolt with the same thread size in easily, just spin it right in a few spins, at least as far as the thing would go, at least as far as the fitting would go. So I mean, I just had to put something in here to fill the hole, and I didn't want to put a bolt in that went in too far, so I put in another fitting and it got tight, like I said, right here. So I'm just leaving it alone. I don't grease these things anyway. It is pre-greased. So let's just spin this on. And now I did not move this at all, so I'm going to try to spin this on and get it to fall right into the hole to get it as close to the original alignment as possible. Now with the other side, because I didn't have to cut it, I was able to take this blade here and I marked the back side of the nut, and I was able to compare both side by side. They actually were the same length exactly. Everything about it was the same except for the threads. The threads on this went further, and the threads ended on the other one and just had more post. So you couldn't compare the turns. Like, say you spun that one off with 15 turns, you couldn't spin this on with 15 turns and call it good, because there were way more threads on this one. But since I could not mark it, I'm just going to try to let it fall in the hole without having moved this. It's also a good idea to clean this seat really well and put a little bit of grease on it so that the boot doesn't get torn. Start your castle nut. And then we need our 2 7/8 wrenches to go on here and here, which I have right here. And that's going to lock this in place so that this doesn't move. So I'm going to do that off camera once again. Now, the way I was able to mark and keep the other side in a good position was, remember how I said they each came with an extra jam nut? Or, I mean, they each came with a jam nut. So I took the extra jam nut and I put it all the way to a spot to lock the jam nut that I want to keep on the car in place. And then when I was ready to put the outer tie rod on, I removed the outer jam nut and kept the inner, or the only jam nut, in place and spun the outer tie rod end in place. So lastly, I just have to tighten this guy here. Usually these are not very high torque, but I just go for fairly tight. I know what it's supposed to feel like. And then you slip the cotter pin in between these little parts here, like this. I mean, I'm not doing it for real right now, but let me torque this. Once you get it about as tight as you think it needs to be, then try to line up the hole with these little slots And if they don't line up, tighten it a little bit more. You never really want to loosen it in order to find the hole. You want to tighten it. And then once it's nice and tight and you have the hole all lined up, and then with your cotter pin pushed through, you just want to bend it around real well out of the way, and that should hold this castle nut in place. And last, I have to go take this for an alignment. So that's how you change your inner and outer tie rods on most cars, but specifically an Acura Integra.